Have you ever been curious about the underworld? A realm where unofficial rules hold more power than the law itself? Amid the shadows of narrow streets, two powerful organizations have written mysterious chapters of history: the Triads and the Tongs. On one side is a notorious global crime network, ready to use any means to expand its influence. On the other is a local organization deeply connected to the Chinese community, both protecting and controlling it. But who truly holds the upper hand? In this video, we'll explore from their tumultuous histories and ambitious expansion strategies to the way reputation and covert alliances shape their power. This clash isn't just about violence or territory, it's a tale of two opposing underworlds, prompting you to question, where does real power lie? Join us as we step into the world of Triads versus Tongs, where secrets, power, and fear intertwine. In the mysterious underworld, the Triads and Tongs are two names synonymous with power, secrecy, and thrilling tales. But how far does their influence extend? And where exactly do they operate? These are questions that many have sought to answer over the decades. The Triads, also known as the Three Harmonies Society, are an international underground force. Their origins are rooted in China, but their influence has extended beyond borders. The Triads are not only powerful in Hong Kong, their economic and cultural hub, but have also expanded to Taiwan, Southeast Asia, Europe, Africa, and North America. Major cities like London, Vancouver, and San Francisco are hotspots that the Triads exploit to broaden their activities. This network reaches beyond Chinese communities and infiltrates local criminal organizations, engaging in drug trafficking, gambling, and international money laundering. To understand their reach, let's look at the numbers. A 2020 report by an international crime investigation agency indicated that the Triads consist of over 100 large and small groups, with an estimated membership in the hundreds of thousands worldwide. A prime example is the Sun Yee-on Group, one of the largest Triad organizations, with a presence in more than 30 countries. Their activities, whether legal or illegal, revolve around seizing economic opportunities in areas where law enforcement systems are lax or susceptible to manipulation. The Tongs, on the other hand, have a different approach, originating in Chinese enclaves in the United States during the 19th century. The Tongs primarily focus on serving the Chinese community. Cities like San Francisco, New York, and Boston are where they laid their foundations and thrived. Rather than expanding internationally, the Tongs concentrate their power within local Chinese communities, where they can exercise control and exploit resources more effectively. Although the Tongs' reach is not as vast as the Triads, it is deeply entrenched in the community. They oversee underground economic activities in Chinatown neighborhoods, from gambling and prostitution to loan sharking. More importantly, they are seen as the protectors of the community, a role that has enabled them to maintain their influence over time. In areas where local authorities neglect or fail to protect the rights of Chinese immigrants, the Tongs step in as substitutes, ensuring safety and stability for the community. One notable example is the Hop Sing Tong in San Francisco. For over 100 years, this organization has not only controlled underground activities but also engaged in legitimate endeavors such as housing development and immigrant support. This demonstrates that the Tongs' operations are not confined to illegal ventures but also include efforts to improve the livelihood of the Chinese community. The differences between the Triads and Tongs go beyond geographic scope. Their methods of maintaining influence are worlds apart. The Triads, with their international network, combine violence, corruption, and alliances with other criminal organizations to expand their reach. Meanwhile, the Tongs focus on building close relationships with businesses and individuals in the community, leveraging their dependence to sustain their power. Which approach is more effective? The Triads, with their cross-border ambitions, have succeeded in extending their influence globally. But does this expansion make them more vulnerable, especially when faced with international crackdowns? Conversely, the Tongs, with their narrower scope, maintain stability and are less affected by external upheavals. Influence and operational scope are among the key factors shaping the strength of an organization. But to truly understand how they operate, we must delve into their organizational structures. Do the Triads, with their tightly centralized system, hold an advantage over the decentralized structure of the Tongs? The answer will be explored in the next chapter. If influence and scope are the visible aspects of an organization, then its structure is the submerged part of the iceberg, where real power is exercised. The Triads and Tongs, despite operating in different contexts, have developed their own organizational models to maintain their strength. However, the way they structure themselves is so distinct that it reflects the core nature and long-term strategies of each group. Let's start with the Triads, a globally operating criminal organization. Their structure resembles a pyramid, with power concentrated in the hands of a single individual or a small group of senior leaders. At the top sits the Dragonhead, who wields absolute authority within the organization. Orders flow down through a clearly defined hierarchy, from the Dragonhead to positions like the Deputy Mountain Master, the Red Pole Enforcer, and the White Paper Fan Strategist, roles steeped in mystique. Each rank has specific responsibilities, ranging from strategic planning and financial operations to carrying out violent acts to protect the organization's interests. Notably, the Triads ensure loyalty and secrecy through complex initiation rites. These ceremonies often involve oaths of allegiance, secret symbols, and even symbolic acts like blood rituals. Joining the Triads means not only becoming a member but committing one's life to the organization with no way out. This approach creates a tightly knit network where every individual is accountable to the group and bound by unwritten rules. However, this centralized structure has its vulnerabilities. When power is concentrated in a single individual or a small group, the organization becomes susceptible if its leaders are captured or eliminated. For instance, in 1997, when a senior leader of a major Hong Kong Triad group was arrested, the organization entered a period of significant crisis, with numerous smaller factions vying for control. Although they eventually recovered, the event highlighted the risks inherent in centralized leadership. In contrast, the Tongs adopt a completely different model. As more localized organizations, the Tongs operate in a decentralized manner. Each Tong functions as an independent group, managing its own activities and responsibilities. There is no single Dragonhead overseeing all operations. Instead, local leaders govern specific regions autonomously. This independence allows the Tongs to remain resilient. If one group is dismantled, others continue to operate largely unaffected. This is a clear strength, enabling the Tongs to survive and thrive amidst external disruptions. However, decentralization also comes with significant drawbacks. The lack of a unified leadership system makes it challenging for the Tongs to execute large-scale strategies or compete with organizations like the Triads. Additionally, internal conflicts often arise among Tong groups when their interests clash. A notable example is the rivalry between two major Tong groups in San Francisco during the early 20th century. These conflicts not only weakened the organization's reputation but also attracted unwanted attention from law enforcement. Despite their differences, both organizations have skillfully leveraged their respective structures. The Triads, with their centralized model, can execute large-scale operations on an international level. When necessary, a single command from the Dragonhead can be implemented across multiple countries, giving them an edge over decentralized groups. On the other hand, the Tongs, lacking such capabilities, are more adaptable to local changes. They maintain influence through community relationships, a feat more challenging for the Triads due to their sprawling network. This raises the question: which model is more suitable in the modern era? The Triads, while powerful, face significant risks if their centralized structure collapses. Meanwhile, the Tongs, though more resilient, struggle to expand or implement large-scale strategies. This debate highlights the clear pros and cons of each model. A striking example illustrating this difference is how the two organizations respond to legal pressure. During the large-scale crackdown on Triad groups in Hong Kong in the early 2000s, numerous senior leaders were arrested, disrupting many of the organization's operations. In contrast, the decentralized nature of the Tongs in the United States allowed them to continue functioning despite the dismantling of some individual groups. This leads to an essential perspective. Real strength lies not only in scope or reputation but also in an organization's ability to adapt to external challenges. To further explore how they construct their image, we need to delve into the next section, where reputation and fear take center stage. Reputation, in the underworld, is perhaps one of the most valuable assets. It is not only how an organization is perceived but also a tool for maintaining power and control. Both the Triads and the Tongs understand this well, but their approaches to building and protecting their reputations differ in striking ways. The Triads have long been symbols of violence, power, and secrecy. Their reputation is built not only on real-world actions but also through legends and popular culture. Tales of brutal punishments for traitors, ranging from cutting off fingers and blinding to public executions, have amplified the fear surrounding the Triads. People fear not just their physical power but also the image of an unforgiving organization willing to defend its interests at any cost. A key factor in the Triads' reputation is their presence in popular culture. Famous Hong Kong films like Infernal Affairs and Election have portrayed the Triads as powerful, mysterious, and dangerous organizations. These depictions not only reinforce their public image but also attract young people who see the Triads as a path to power and respect. However, this fame also comes with risks. Being in the media spotlight makes it harder for the Triads to evade scrutiny from law enforcement, particularly on an international level. In contrast, the Tongs are not as globally renowned as the Triads. Instead of relying on bloody tales or media portrayals, the Tongs build their reputation through their ties to the community. In Chinese enclaves across the United States, the Tongs are often seen as underground protectors, maintaining order and safeguarding the rights of Chinese immigrants in a society rife with discrimination. While they do engage in illegal activities, the Tongs have managed to maintain an image as an indispensable part of the community. This approach gives the Tongs a significant advantage. While the Triads face intense crackdowns from authorities, the Tongs are often shielded by local residents who either protect them or at least refrain from reporting them. For example, in San Francisco's Chinatown, many businesses willingly pay protection fees to the Tongs not just out of fear but because they view it as a way to maintain peace and stability in the area. These relationships allow the Tongs to build their reputation in a unique way, relying on their close ties to the community rather than violence. However, reputation has two sides. On one hand, it brings power and respect. On the other, it creates immense pressure for both organizations. The Triads, with their fearsome image, must constantly demonstrate strength to uphold their reputation. Any sign of weakness, no matter how small, could result in a loss of respect from rivals and even their own members. This is why the Triads consistently use violence, not only to protect their interests but also to reaffirm their status. The Tongs, on the other hand, face a different challenge, since their reputation is tied to the community. Any action against the interests of the people can severely damage their image. For instance, in the 1980s, a Tong group in New York was accused of involvement in drug trafficking, sparking backlash from the Chinese community. This incident not only eroded public trust but also caused internal divisions within the organization. The biggest difference in how the two organizations manage their reputations lies in their level of public exposure. The Triads do not shy away from letting their name be known. Even beyond the underworld, their name appears in international investigations, major news reports, and even criminology studies. This visibility is both an advantage and a weakness. Meanwhile, the Tongs operate more discreetly, focusing on smaller scales and maintaining their presence through direct relationships with the community. This raises an intriguing question between the global reputation of the Triads and the strategic silence of the Tongs. Which is more effective in the modern underworld? The Triads may attract more resources and partners due to their notoriety, but they also become prime targets for law enforcement. On the other hand, the Tongs, while less conspicuous, struggle to expand their influence beyond local communities. A notable example is a 2015 incident when the Triads were targeted in a major drug trafficking crackdown in Europe. This operation not only cost them millions of dollars but also exposed critical details about their network. In contrast, during the same year, Tong groups in New York and San Francisco continued their operations undisturbed, thanks to their strong local ties and their ability to avoid high-profile activities. This brings us to an important perspective. True power lies not only in reputation but also in an organization's ability to adapt to external challenges. However, to fully understand how their reputations were shaped, we must look into their historical roots, the foundation that first defined their images. It is history, with its tumultuous beginnings, that has shaped the ways in which the Triads and Tongs build and protect their reputations. Join us in the next section, where we delve into the origins and histories of these two organizations, offering a deeper understanding of their true nature. When discussing any organization, history and origins are the first pieces of the puzzle that help us understand its nature and reason for existence. The Triads and Tongs, though sharing some similarities in the present day, emerged from entirely different contexts that profoundly reflect how society shaped them. The Triads, or the Three Harmonies Society, trace their roots back to the 17th century in China. At that time, the country was under the rule of the Qing dynasty. The Triads were initially founded not as a criminal organization but as a patriotic movement opposing the oppressive Qing government. With the goal of restoring the Ming dynasty, the Triads built their ideology around harmony among heaven, earth, and humanity, the three elements symbolized in their iconic name. During this period, the Triads were not just an organization but a beacon of hope for those resisting oppression. However, times change. When the Qing dynasty collapsed in the early 20th century, the Triads lost their political purpose. Without a common ideal to unite them, they gradually transformed into a criminal force, exploiting societal chaos to dominate illicit activities. This shift was most evident in Hong Kong, where the Triads found opportunities in a rapidly growing city. Starting with providing protection to small businesses, they soon expanded into gambling, drug trafficking, and even international money laundering. A significant turning point for the Triads occurred in the 1960s and 1970s when they began expanding beyond China's borders. Waves of Chinese migration to Southeast Asia, Europe, and North America provided the Triads with a chance to establish an international network. They not only followed immigrant communities but also forged alliances with local criminal organizations, ranging from the Italian mafia to Mexican drug cartels. Over the centuries, the Triads evolved from a local political movement into a global criminal powerhouse. In contrast, the Tongs have an entirely different origin. Emerging in the 19th century in the United States, the Tongs were not founded with lofty political ideals like the Triads. Instead, they arose from the survival needs of Chinese immigrants in a society rife with discrimination and violence. During this time, Chinese communities in America faced numerous hardships, from harsh working conditions and racial segregation to direct attacks on their neighborhoods. Initially, the Tongs were formed as secret societies to protect Chinese immigrants from hostile forces. They helped new arrivals find jobs, housing, and security within Chinatowns. However, over time, the Tongs shifted their focus to underground economic activities such as gambling, prostitution, and opium trade. Unlike the Triads, the Tongs primarily operated within Chinese communities in the United States, rather than expanding internationally. A notable example of the Tongs' development is seen in San Francisco during the late 19th century. Amid a local government that ignored the rights of immigrants, the Tongs became an indispensable force in Chinatown. They not only defended the community from external attacks but also controlled underground businesses to maintain their power. However, this period also saw the onset of internal conflicts among Tongs as different groups vied for territory and resources. These Tong Wars lasted for decades, weakening the organization and attracting unwanted attention from law enforcement. Interestingly, despite their different origins, the Triads and Tongs share one commonality: they were born out of social injustice. The Triads emerged to fight political oppression, while the Tongs were formed to counter racial discrimination. This highlights a broader reality, that in times of instability, such organizations often become a refuge for those marginalized by society. However, the ways in which these two groups evolved after achieving their initial goals diverge significantly. The Triads, with their vision extending beyond borders, quickly seized opportunities in international markets. They did not hesitate to reinvent themselves, transforming from a political movement into a global criminal force. In contrast, the Tongs chose to remain focused on their local communities. While they also engaged in illegal activities, they retained part of their image as community protectors. This raises a compelling question: does an organization's original purpose determine its developmental trajectory? The Triads, with their political foundation, shifted entirely toward criminality, while the Tongs, rooted in community protection, continued to play a partial protective role even as they became corrupted. This question not only deepens our understanding of these two organizations but also offers insights into how society and history influence the growth of underground forces. To illustrate this further, consider a real-world example. During the 1980s, the Triads in Hong Kong thrived by exploiting opportunities in the entertainment and real estate sectors. They not only controlled casinos but also ventured into film production and even influenced the music industry. Meanwhile, the Tongs in New York during the same period focused on maintaining order in Chinatown, protecting small businesses from rival gangs, and ensuring that the Chinese community had a safe space to live and work. This stark difference poses a larger question. Does adapting to the times erode an organization's original essence? The Triads, with their changes to expand influence, have become a formidable global force. But have they retained any trace of their original ideals? Meanwhile, the Tongs, though less ambitious, have maintained their connection to the community, a value many see as their core identity. The histories of the Triads and Tongs are not just stories of formation and evolution. They are lessons in how societal contexts can give rise to powerful underground forces. To better understand how they sustain their power over time, we must delve into another critical aspect: strategies for expansion and territorial control. This is the key to their survival and dominance in the ever-changing underworld. If history and origins are the foundation shaping the essence of an organization, then strategies for expansion and territorial control are the mechanisms through which they sustain their existence and solidify power. For the Triads and Tongs, this is one of the most crucial aspects distinguishing how they operate and dominate in the underworld. The Triads, with their international network, have always pursued an ambitious strategy of expansion. After establishing their strength in Hong Kong and mainland China, they quickly looked beyond their borders for new opportunities. Southeast Asia, with its strategic location and massive drug market, became one of their first destinations. From there, the Triads extended their reach to Europe, North America, and even Africa, regions where waves of Chinese immigrants created demand for an underground organization to either protect their interests or exploit illegal economic opportunities. One of the key methods the Triads use to expand is exploiting weaknesses in the legal systems of the countries they enter. For instance, in Southeast Asia, where laws are either weak or can be manipulated, the Triads quickly established networks for drug and arms smuggling. In Europe, they sought partnerships with local crime organizations to dominate synthetic drug markets, which yield enormous profits. Meanwhile, in North America, the Triads leveraged Chinese communities to set up money laundering channels, smuggle contraband, and expand online gambling operations. What's particularly striking about the Triads' strategy is their selective use of violence. Although known for their brutality, the Triads don't always prioritize violence. Instead, they use intimidation as a tool to ensure compliance, resorting to physical force only when no other option remains. This approach not only helps them avoid unnecessary attention from law enforcement but also builds a fearsome reputation that deters rival organizations. In contrast, the Tongs employ a completely different strategy. Instead of expanding internationally, the Tongs focus on territorial control within Chinatowns across the United States. For them, maintaining local power is far more critical than pursuing ambitious growth. From San Francisco and New York to Boston, the Tongs have built a robust network to maintain control over areas they consider their home. One way the Tongs implement this strategy is by fostering strong ties with their communities. Unlike the Triads, which often operate as separate entities, the Tongs position themselves at the heart of Chinese communities. They collect protection fees from businesses not only as a source of profit but also to ensure that these businesses will support them when needed. For many small businesses in Chinatown, paying the Tongs is not just security insurance, but a way to maintain a good relationship with a significant local power. Additionally, the Tongs are not shy about participating in legitimate activities to strengthen their presence. For instance, many Tongs sponsor cultural festivals, build temples, and even provide legal assistance to new immigrants. These activities help them foster a positive image within their communities. making residents not only fear them but also feel a sense of gratitude. This creates a form of soft power that the Triads struggle to compete with. However, the Tongs' local-focused strategy is not without its drawbacks. While the Triads can tap into international markets to boost their revenue streams, the Tongs are confined to the limits of Chinatowns. This makes them vulnerable if these areas face economic difficulties or come under pressure from local government policies. For example, in the 1970s, when the US government intensified crackdowns on gambling and prostitution in Chinatowns, many Tong groups suffered significant financial losses. An interesting aspect of both organizations' territorial control strategies is how they handle competition. The Triads, with their international network, often adopt a strategy of forming alliances to address conflicts. They are willing to collaborate with other organizations if it serves mutual interests. In contrast, the Tongs typically choose direct confrontation, especially when rivals encroach on their territory. The violent conflicts between Tong groups in San Francisco or New York in the past are clear examples of this approach. Surprisingly, the Tongs also demonstrate a unique knack for leveraging the law to protect their interests. Rather than outright opposing authorities, many Tong groups have cultivated relationships with local officials and even participated in charitable activities to divert attention. This has allowed them to survive and thrive even during challenging times. A notable example is how these two organizations respond to government crackdowns. In the 1990s, when the Triads in Hong Kong faced intense crackdowns and several senior leaders were arrested, they leveraged their international network to continue operations in regions like Southeast Asia and Europe, where enforcement was weaker. Conversely, when certain Tong groups in San Francisco were targeted, they quickly restructured by legalizing parts of their operations, such as moving into real estate or providing financial services to the Chinese community. This raises the question: which strategy is more effective? The Triads, with their cross-border ambitions, clearly have access to greater rewards, but this also makes them more vulnerable to international crackdowns. Meanwhile, the Tongs, despite their local focus, exhibit remarkable resilience due to their deep connections with the community. This is a question without an easy answer, but it is precisely this contrast that makes both organizations fascinating. To conclude this section, imagine a scenario. If the Triads and Tongs were to face off directly in a specific region, which strategy would prevail? Would the Triads' international reach or the Tongs' local control provide the upper hand? This is a debate that will likely continue, as the answer depends heavily on the context and the era. Next, we'll explore another equally decisive factor: partnerships and alliances, where both organizations demonstrate their cunning in building relationships to consolidate their power. In the underworld, no organization can endure long-term isolation. Partnerships and alliances not only reinforce power but also open up new opportunities, creating unparalleled strength. The Triads and Tongs, with their contrasting approaches and objectives, have taken very different paths to forge these relationships, highlighting their divergent strategies. The Triads, with their global ambitions and reach, constantly seek connections with other major criminal organizations worldwide. Their alliances are not merely short-term agreements but often long-term relationships built on mutual economic benefits and trust established over time. A prominent example is the collaboration between the Triads and Mexican drug cartels in transporting fentanyl from China to North America. This is not just an economic arrangement but a strategic partnership that bolsters both sides' positions in the international criminal market. One notable aspect of how the Triads build alliances is their adaptability to different partners. In Southeast Asia, they collaborate with local smuggling groups to leverage existing networks, while in Europe, they partner with Eastern European mafias to dominate synthetic drug markets. These alliances generate immense profits and allow the Triads to penetrate markets they could not control alone. However, the reliance on international alliances also poses significant risks for the Triads. A clear example occurred in 2019 when a partner in Southeast Asia was arrested, exposing critical information about the Triads' operations. This resulted in substantial financial and reputational damage to the organization. While the Triads are capable of rebuilding, this event underscores the double-edged nature of their reliance on global partnerships. especially when one link in their network is compromised. In contrast, the Tongs adopt an entirely different model for building alliances. Operating primarily within U.S. Chinatowns, the Tongs focus on maintaining close relationships with local communities and smaller organizations. These connections are not aimed at expanding their reach but at strengthening their position within their territories. One noteworthy example is how the Tongs collaborate with Chinese businesses in San Francisco. Instead of imposing power through violence, they build trust by providing protection and financial support to these businesses. In return, businesses contribute regularly to the Tongs through protection fees or sponsorship of cultural activities organized by the Tongs. This creates a closed loop of mutual benefit, where the Tongs are both funded and shielded by the community. However, the Tongs' deep ties to the local community also come with limitations. These relationships bind them to local issues, making it difficult to expand their influence beyond their controlled areas. Moreover, when communities face significant changes, such as relocation or stricter government policies, the Tongs are also vulnerable to these shifts. A significant distinction between the two organizations lies in how they establish and maintain trust in their alliances. The Triads often rely on violence and fear to ensure loyalty from their partners. A telling example is how they handle non-compliant partners, through direct threats or harsh punishments, sending a clear message that betrayal will not be tolerated. In contrast, the Tongs take a softer approach, focusing on personal relationships and mutual dependence. In many cases, the Tongs act not just as protectors but also as mediators in economic or social disputes within Chinatown. This approach allows them to maintain strong ties with their partners without resorting to violence. The question arises, between a global approach and a localized focus, which strategy is more effective for building alliances? The Triads, with their international network, can achieve greater benefits but face significant risks from betrayal or partner failures. Meanwhile, the Tongs, though limited in scale, can maintain more stable and enduring alliances due to their deep integration with the community. A specific example highlighting this difference is an incident in Vancouver in 2015. The Triads, attempting to expand their drug market, collaborated with a local crime group for transportation. However, when the group was dismantled by authorities, the Triads not only lost a key partner but also exposed themselves, leading to a series of investigations targeting their Canadian network. Conversely, in New York, the Tongs leveraged their relationship with the Chinese community to address a financial crisis caused by struggling local businesses. Rather than facing setbacks, the Tongs even solidified their position, being seen as protectors of the community during tough times. Lastly, the role of law enforcement cannot be overlooked in influencing these alliances. The Triads, with their international operations, often face coordinated efforts from law enforcement agencies across multiple countries, making them more vulnerable to large-scale crackdowns. On the other hand, the Tongs, with their narrower scope of activity, often avoid the attention of high-level authorities, allowing them to maintain relationships with local partners with relatively low risk. Partnerships and alliances are key to the survival and growth of both the Triads and Tongs. But can their differing approaches endure in an increasingly complex and rapidly changing world? This question invites reflection as we consider the role of alliances in shaping the power and influence of these two organizations. You've just embarked on a fascinating journey into the enigmatic world of two of the most powerful criminal organizations in history. The Triads, with their global ambitions, have wielded violence and alliances to expand far and wide. Meanwhile, the Tongs, deeply rooted in their communities, have built enduring strength over generations. So, what do you think? Which strategy is more effective? Is it reputation, or quiet resilience, that holds the key to dominating the underworld? If you found this story intriguing, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next videos. Join us as we uncover more thrilling and insightful stories about the world's most mysterious organizations. See you in the next video.